My sister and I had the same private music tutor. I wanted to learn how to play the flute, so my mom signed me up for music lessons. I was about 12 when I started lessons. My music tutor, Rustin, seemed cool. He was a little silly, but he loved music. I was excited and practiced my flute constantly. I even went ahead in my book and practiced for hours. Rustin gave me a music sheet for popular music and it made playing the flute more fun. Slowly, things went downhill. Rustin would bring his gadgets to work, like a new Polaroid that could double expose film, and wasted lessons taking pictures of me. He wanted me to kiss myself. It made me uncomfortable and I was extremely shy. He put the photos on his wall, which had pictures of other students. He loved to push my buttons because I was so shy. He'd often do annoying things, like record me saying something and play it over and over on his keyboard, or ask me inappropriate questions like, "Do you have a boyfriend?" Or make an innuendo about something I said, but not in an overtly obvious way. Like once he asked me what my favorite dessert was, and I said peach pie. He started making jokes about it. "Do you know what peaches look like?" I said no, and he started singing, "I'm moving to the country, gonna eat a lot of peaches." He started asking me if I like to eat the peach and laughing. I felt uncomfortable, even though I was young and didn't catch on to the innuendo. Eventually, he wasted entire classes. For months, I learned nothing. Rustin would show up 15 minutes late to my classes, and they were only 30 minutes, or spend an entire class making small talk. Somehow, I believe this was my fault. One day, I just started playing my flute, and he said, "Let's not kid ourselves," as if I didn't want to learn the flute anymore. I felt guilty, like I had done something wrong. But he was the adult in the situation, and he actually refused to teach me. My neighbor, Chris, had Rustin as a teacher for the saxophone and had quit. I asked him why, and he said Rustin was annoying and only played his keyboard the whole class. I told my mom I didn't want to play the flute anymore and was surprised that she took it well. I didn't tell her the truth because I was afraid Rustin would lie. A few years down the road, my younger sister took lessons with him. I warned her about him slacking off. Eventually, he started acting up, but much worse. My sister was the same age as me when she wanted to quit her lessons too, 14. She told me that Rustin took a photo of her for her MySpace, but he had been logging into her account and reading her messages. During lessons, he had been doing some of the same things he had done to me, only with a creepier twist. Like he would put his hand on her knee, or squirting her with his squirt gun and saying she could be in a wet t-shirt contest. I told her to tell him off and to tell our mom. My sister wanted to handle it. She really wanted to learn guitar and the clarinet, and the store Rustin worked at was the only place in the area where we could easily walk to. Her last class, she told him off. She told him I said he was a bad teacher. He had been playing his keyboard and she decided to play her clarinet, like she was supposed to, and he told her she was a bad student and she was misbehaving. He said I was a good student and never acted up. She told him what I said and he said, "Seriously? Fuck you." She stormed out. I told her to tell Mom everything. She told our mom about the outburst he had. She was really upset and didn't want to take lessons anymore. My mom made him apologize, but wanted my sister to continue lessons since she was in a band. Rustin had told my mom my sister swore at him, and he chalked it up as a misunderstanding. My sister told her everything and our mom let her quit right away. My mom told him my sister no longer wanted to continue her lessons with him.
Last night, I was laying in bed watching YouTube videos on my phone. and fallen asleep when I hear someone struggling with their lock next door. Then silence. And then a different adjacent condo sounds like they're having trouble. This didn't sound too right. I silently got out of bed and grabbed my M&P9. Then I see the outline of a man in the twilight at my cracked open window. I can see his silhouette through the blinds. He punched my screen out and tried to climb in. I dialed 911. It took almost 30 seconds to get someone with all the auto attendant menus asking if I speak Spanish. All the while, I'm screaming, "Get the fuck out of my house!" Dispatch finally answers. I start shouting my address. Shouting, "Get the fuck out of my house! Home invasion in progress. I can't get out, and I will defend myself." He says, "I don't give a fuck." But he just stared at me, and then left. That was it.
I am a girl currently in high school, and a few years ago in middle school we had this one teacher that really freaked me out. He taught us for science and physical education. I will admit that he was a good science teacher. He explained things well and seemed pretty intelligent. However, right from the start, he always made me feel nervous. He had this way of looking at you really closely, and it always made me feel uncomfortable. I would consider myself a pretty polite person, but if I saw him walking my way in the corridor, I would always change my route to avoid walking by him. I felt bad for avoiding him, but I couldn't shake that anxious feeling. Physical education lessons were the worst. I hated running and jumping around in front of him, but he was the sort of teacher who would force you to do it, even if you really didn't want to. Thankfully, my mom understood this and would occasionally write a note in my homework planner to get me out of physical education. On one of these occasions, our class was doing gymnastics and we had to come up with a routine in groups of 3. I was lucky enough to have all 5 of my best friends in my class, so the 3 of my friends were in one group while I was with the other 2. Because I was sitting out, the teacher made me sit right next to him on the bench to watch everyone. As my 3 friends got up to perform their sequence to the class, he leaned in and whispered to me, "Can you do a job for me? Please watch the girls closely and count how many times they pull up their shorts, or touch their legs, or smooth out their shirts." I thought it was a super weird request, but I didn't want to disobey him, so I agreed. Obviously, I didn't stare at my friends' butts and shirts. I just made up a number to tell him afterwards, but he was watching very closely indeed. At the end, he asked me to tell them what I was doing, so I did, and they looked so embarrassed and confused. The teacher was just laughing the whole time, and eventually said something about how fiddling with your clothes would take marks off your grade in the assignment or whatever. Another incident I had with him, still in gym, I was busy fucking around on the wall ladders when I happened to catch sight of the teacher, sitting with his legs and mouth wide open. Then I saw something that I did not want to see. On the crotch area of his shorts was a dark stain. He either pissed himself or, you know. Lastly, the one thing that really stuck out as weird was one occasion around Christmas time. Our middle school was really uptight and bitchy with all sorts of dumb rules. We were absolutely forbidden to be inside the building at break or lunch. We had to be outside. No, I don't know why. You'd literally get detention if you were caught walking around indoors. So anyway, one fucking cold morning, my friends and I simply didn't want to be outside, so we crept indoors. The teacher came down the corridor and saw us, so I decided I had to run away and hide into the girls' bathroom. He followed me in, quite literally. He walked right into the girls' bathroom and pushed open the unlocked cubicle doors, pausing outside of mine, before creeping back out. I'm so glad I left that school. I know nothing really creepy or bad happened, but it was enough to freak us 12-year-old kids out at the time.
I survived 2 home invasions. The first home invasion happened in 1994. I was 5, and we lived in a rough area. I was in the lounge room with my new baby sister when a brick came smashing through the window next to us. The next thing I remember is my parents hurrying myself and my 2 brothers upstairs and told us to hide under the beds. I watched my dad get a knife and tape it to the end of a broom. They tried kicking our front door in, but didn't succeed, and the police arrived and scared them off. Needless to say, we all slept in the same room and bed that night. The second home invasion happened when I was about 10 years old. I came home to my family going about their normal behaviour. My dad had some friends over. They were at the kitchen table laughing and talking. It was about 7 p.m, and my dad and his friends went into my parents' room, whilst my mother, sister and older brother and one of my dad's friends stayed in my lounge room. After a few minutes, we heard the sound of things falling over and bangs up against the wall. So we all looked up to the hallway, and out came my dad's friend holding a knife to his throat, demanding money. They cut our phone line and forced us onto the same lounge. Terrified, my sister and I cried uncontrollably. We were told to shut up or they would hurt us both. We couldn't stop, and I was stabbed in my top thigh. My dad convinced them all to go downstairs. All we heard was fighting, and the front door slammed and my dad came back, with a big cut across top of his arm, saying that they were gone. We all ran next door and rang the police. My other brother stayed in his room the entire time. He didn't even know what happened because he had earphones in.
I'm in college now, and this happened when I was going into 5th grade. I wasn't really the target of this story, but the man involved was a religion teacher at my church, as well as my summer school teacher. My parents loved putting me in summer school. My mom was a waitress and my dad was the president of a piping company. My elementary school was about a 15-minute walk from my house, so I would walk to and from school and stay home for the day until my mom came home at about 3 o'clock. I know I was really young to stay home alone, but it really helped me learn independence, and I felt like the boss of the house, the main girl. Well, one morning, my mom didn't have to be in work until later, so she decided to drop me off. I liked my summer school classes at the time, but the one that I was put in sucked. It was making things out of wood. First of all, I hate everything that has to do with that because I am really clumsy, and art is not my specialty. My teacher was a man in his early 30s and seemed pretty normal, and he was extremely nice. However, I noticed that he was overly friendly with the boys. On the day that my mom didn't have to leave early for work, she took me to school and I walked out and my teacher asked me for some help. He asked me to come to his car. My mom noticed and she never left. While I was helping him, he made small talk about how well the boys were doing, and I thought it was rather odd, but pushed the thought out of my head. As the weeks went on, I noticed that he was super touchy with the boys in my class, and he would give them extra help. This just creeped me out. I was the girl who needed desperate help because my wooden box was all messed up, and I was frustrated. My teacher never once helped me. He would comment on how well the boys' projects were looking and completely ignored the girls. I just thought he liked boys more than he liked girls because he was a boy himself. After a nice break from summer school for 2 days, Monday rolled around and I walked into class and there was a totally different teacher. I was super surprised because my old teacher was always early and talking to the boys. This teacher never said a word about where our real one went. After school, I went home and watched TV with my dog. Later, my mom walked in the door and she had this disgusted look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and that was when she told me. My summer school teacher was helping out with the church's summer activities and lured small boys about my age into a storage closet and molested them. My mom and I had a very long talk, And even though I had a hard time understanding all of this, I started to piece it together as I got older. I felt so awful for those boys, I wish I could have said something. My teacher ended up going to jail and had to go through intensive counseling. I haven't heard a word about him since. So, creepy pedophile summer school teacher, let's not ever meet again.
I was home alone one night. I was 11, but I begged my dad not to get sitter. I was sitting on the computer in the living room that had like these big sliding windows which went into the back garden. The backyard motion light goes on, but I didn't think too much of it since we lived in the woods. There were like rabbits and deers were quite common. After it didn't go off for about 10 minutes or so, I look over my shoulder to the window to see if some deers were eating at my dad's garden, but I saw an old man, about 50, just staring right at me, right in my eyes. I was so scared I couldn't move. I finally jumped up and ran upstairs to my dad's room. I grabbed his gun and sat at the corner of the room facing the door. When my dad got home in the mid-morning, about 2 a.m, he found me still crawled up in the corner clutching the gun. Since then, my biggest fear is looking out of the window and seeing people staring back at me.
I moved to Loveland, Colorado with my family when I was 9 years old. Loveland is not a big city, but it's not a small town either. We lived in a nice house just on the outskirts of town, so my little sister and I attended Big Thompson Elementary School since it was nearby. It'd be fair to say that all the students at Big T lived out in the boonies and were what you might consider to be more country-type kids. When I was in 5th grade, my class couldn't have more than 35 kids in it, and we were split into 2 classes so our teachers' jobs were more manageable. To add some more information, it was probably 2002 to 2003-ish when I was in 5th grade, and I am a girl, which will be relevant later. Big T had 2 playgrounds, and has your standard jungle gym equipment, most of which is pretty old. The upper playground is mostly dirt and gravel. When it was nice outside, which it usually is in northern Colorado, we would often have our gym classes there so we had lots of room to run, or to trip and fall and get sand and small rocks embedded into our skin. I still have scars on my knees. Now that you know Big T, here's my story. I believe my peers and I had finished up with our music class and we headed to our gym class. It was nice outside, and we were instructed to go to the upper playground. As kids do, we were laughing and talking to our best friends. We started walking up the stairs, and at the top waiting for us was a man who introduced himself as our substitute gym teacher for the day, since the regular teacher was away. Do you ever get feelings about people, good or bad? These are not necessarily related to anything the person does or says. It's just something about them that you can't really explain. You feel like you know them on some deeper level. For some reason, my mom is really spot on with her feelings, especially the negative ones. She's warned me about someone I shouldn't hang out with because of a bad feeling, and then, sure as shit, that person ends up doing something that usually ends with me getting my feelings hurt. Anyway, when I saw this sub from a distance, he immediately struck me as odd. He was wearing these tapered leg 90s looking dad jeans, old gym shoes, glasses like Napoleon Dynamite's, and a semi-long dark coat that was probably mid-thigh length or longer. It was weird because it was warm outside, and any gym teacher I'd seen before always wore exercise clothes. However, when I got closer to him, I felt something was not just weird about him, but wrong. My gut knotted up, My heart started pounding out of my chest, and as his eyes met mine, I felt like a deer in someone's crosshairs. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't. No one else seemed to look nervous, so I tried to brush it off. It's been easily 10 years since this happened, so I don't remember all the in-between details, but I think after he took attendance, he told us to run a few laps like normal. Once we started jogging, I began to feel better the further I was away from him. Unfortunately, we were running in an oval, so when I was getting closer again, that bad gut feeling returned, and it got exponentially worse with every nearing step I took. This continued the entire time we were running. I don't really remember what we were doing in class that day. I think everyone was doing different things in their own little groups. Some girls were playing catch with a softball, most of the boys were playing with the football, some of us were playing kickball, etc. So we were spread out all over the field. I was just trying to stay as far away from this guy as possible, and I expressed that concern to my best friend. Of course, though, she just had to go to the bathroom and required my company and forced me to go ask the sub with her. I was terrified as we were approaching this guy, and he looked excited that we were coming up to him. My friend didn't seem to feel what I was feeling, so she didn't understand. The sub started talking to my friend a bit, but I wouldn't talk to him. As we were standing by him, several times he took a small step towards me with this creepy smile and his hand in his coat pocket. I would step back every time he stepped forward. He noticed that my friend wasn't shying away from him like I was, so he took a step towards her so he was standing mostly next to her, but also slightly behind her, if that makes sense. And he put his arm over her shoulder. I don't remember any of the dialogue because all I could think about was his hand was not just on her shoulder anymore, it was slowly inching down towards her chest. I felt so helpless to what was happening. I felt like all I could do was watch in mute horror as this man tried to fondle my best friend. She and I made eye contact, and my fear was mirrored perfectly on her face. Her eyes were welling up, and she said something about going to the bathroom now. We walked off into the far corner of the basketball court, and the sub didn't notice. She started crying, and between sobs I was able to gather that she felt something hard when he was standing kind of behind her. I tried to comfort her, but I was completely clueless. We were watching him walk towards another one of our classmates who was playing softball with her friends. I guess they'd accidentally thrown the ball over the back fence, and she was asking if she could go retrieve it. He put his arm around her but still had the other hand in his pocket, like he did my friend, but she immediately threw his arm off of her and yelled, "Get off of me!" I honestly can't remember the rest of gym class that day. My friend and I were hiding by the trees and bushes in the corner of the basketball court until the bell rang. I do remember that right before class started, one of my peers with whom I normally didn't speak approached my best friend and me and asked if the sub did anything to us. She nodded yes, and the girl brought us over to the main group of girls. All of us, all the girls in the 5th grade, started talking about what to do. We felt comfortable with the female teacher and felt like we could trust her, so those of us who were in the male teacher's class asked to go over to the female teacher's room because we needed to tell her something personal. We all told her what happened, and the few of us that hadn't been touched just confirmed what we saw. When I got home, I found my dad and told him that we had a creepy teacher and relayed some of what I saw. I guess I started off the wrong way because he immediately turned pale and yelled at me to tell me if the man touched me. I said no. He said, "Oh, thank God. I really didn't want to go to jail right now." I didn't really understand how protective a man is of his daughter until I was well into my teens, and my dad described in great detail what he would do to any man or boy who abused me in any way. Looking back, I know for a fact that if my answer had been yes, my dad would have grabbed that .45 off the top of the fridge, loaded his Kill Me a Bear rounds into it, and hunted that sub-teacher down. At that moment, consequences would be damned. A while later, My parents approached me and asked if I wanted to testify in court against the sub. They said I didn't need to since they had a lot of other witnesses and victims, but that I could if I wanted to and that it wouldn't hurt. I think he fondled some of the girls in 4th grade too, but I could be wrong. I said no because I was too afraid of seeing him again, even though he didn't physically touch me. I regret that sometimes, but he got a pretty harsh sentence and is probably going to die in prison. Again, I could be wrong because this was 10 years ago, but I believe that he had previously been charged with some creepy pedophile shit and the school didn't do a background check on him before letting him sub. I don't know if any lawsuits ensued. Maybe I'm making things up. I barely remember. But my parents said I was afraid to leave the house because I thought I'd see him and he'd hurt me for telling on him. Something like that. I'm sorry this is so long and rambling. I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me. I've spent quite a bit of time trying to find any article about it, but I can't seem to dig up any new info about police reports or the case. Hey guys, thank you all for watching. Now I'm going to be doing something a little bit different here on the ending note of this video. Considering my stories were on pedophiles, I feel it's important to spread awareness since I am on this topic, because like domestic abuse, it is a growing problem. And if you are a victim or becoming a victim from a parent, a teacher, a priest, or anyone for that matter, don't be afraid to call the number that I put up on this screen. I understand you're scared, I understand you're embarrassed. I personally don't have any experiences with that other than a time when I was 3. I really don't remember that though because my mom kind of jumped in right away to save me. But I do know that this problem is really severe, just like domestic abuse. So please, call the number up on the screen if you are a victim or becoming a victim. Please, help out anybody in need and always reach out for a hand. You guys are awesome. And once again, I'd like to thank Nathan Deuce TV for collabing with me on this video. Thank you so much, man. Your stories were awesome. And if you guys haven't, please check out Nathan Deuce TV. I guarantee you guys will like him. So anyways, guys, thank you all for watching once again. And just remember, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.